scriptures to gain some encouragement as we continue in the service of the Lord. We'd like to take a look at the qualifications for successful service. And we'll begin by referring to a wonderful invitation to us, which is found in the book of Isaiah chapter 58, verse 12. And it says, "And they that shall be of thee shall build the old waste places. Thou shalt rise up the foundations of many generations, and thou shalt be called the repairer of the breach and the restorer of paths to dwell in." And as we can see, it is indeed a wonderful invitation for us to be restorers, rebuilders, setting back the worship of God to its original state, and thereby ushering in the long-awaited kingdom of glory, with a promise of a great reward found in verse 14, which says, "Then shalt thou delight thyself in the Lord, and I will cause thee to ride upon the high places of the earth, and feed thee with the heritage of Jacob thy father, for the mouth of the Lord hath spoken it." Indeed, it seems like a most glorious work, but to make it to the finish line, it does require us to count the cost. If we take a look at the mother of the two disciples, she asked a special favor for her son, and she requested that one might be on the right and the other on the left hand when the kingdom should be set up. And when we read the response of Jesus, it applies just as much to any of us who would engage in the work of the Lord. In Matthew 20, verse 22, "But Jesus answered and said, Ye know not what ye ask. Are ye able to drink of the cup that I shall drink of, and to be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with?" They say unto him, "We are able." Once again, in Luke chapter 14, verse 27, Christ says, "And whosoever doth not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, intending to build a tower, sitteth not down first, and counteth the cost, whether he hath sufficient to finish it? Lest, haply, after he hath laid the foundation and is not able to finish it, all that behold it begin to mock him, saying, This man began to build and was not able to finish." That would be indeed a terrible scene where we begin to engage in a work and then we fail to reach the finish line because we haven't counted the cost beforehand. So in terms of counting the cost, we would like to look at what might be the successful qualifications which will lead us to complete this work. And while looking at those, we want to view some aspects of another gentleman in the Bible who also had a major role of rebuilding the old waste places, in fact, the wall of Jerusalem. And we're going to draw some encouragement from his conduct so that we can also participate in the work of restoration, and that we're also assured of success by the grace of God. And this man I'm talking about is Nehemiah. And I like to believe we've come across his story, but we just want to look at some of his experiences in the rebuilding of the wall and check which qualifications he had, which led to his success in this venture. And why Nehemiah? Because the work done in the time of Nehemiah, Ezra, the prophets Haggai and Zechariah, it mirrors the work which we have to do now, which is a work of rebuilding. So I'll begin by reading from the very first chapter of the book of Nehemiah. I'll read a few verses from chapter 1. From the beginning it says, "The words of Nehemiah, the son of Hakaliah. And it came to pass in the month Kislev, in the 20th year, as I was in Shushan the palace, that Hanani, one of my brethren, came, he and certain men of Judah, and I asked them concerning the Jews that had escaped, which were left of the captivity, and concerning Jerusalem. And they said unto me, The remnant that are left of the captivity there in the province are in great affliction and reproach. The wall of Jerusalem is also broken down, and the gates thereof are burned with fire. And it came to pass when I heard these words that I sat down and wept, and mourned certain days, and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. Remember, I beseech thee, the word that thou commandest thy servant Moses, saying, If ye transgress, I will scatter you abroad among the nations. But if you turn unto me and keep my commandments and do them, though they were of you cast out unto the utmost part of the heaven, yet will I gather from thence and will bring them unto the place that I have chosen to set my name there. O Lord, I beseech thee, let now thine ear be attentive to the prayer of thy servant and to the prayer of thy servants who desire to fear thy name and prosper. I pray thee, thy servant, this day, and grant him mercy in the sight of this man, for I was the king's cupbearer. So we see Nehemiah getting some sad information about the situation back in Jerusalem, that the walls are broken down, the gates are burnt, the people are living in reproach. It was really a sad situation, and we see he was really touched. He was moved by the situation. It wasn't just sad news which he ignored, but he felt it had to do with him. That's what leads us to the very first qualification which can lead us to be successful in the Lord's service and in the work of rebuilding, and that is responsiveness, to have a responsive heart to the things of the Lord. And what does that mean? Well, we're going to read a little bit from Testimonies to the Church, volume 9, page 123, and it says that the Lord demands that in his servants shall be found a spirit that is quick to feel the value of souls, quick to discern the duties to be done, quick to respond to the obligations that the Lord lays upon them. So we need to pray for such a responsive and discerning spirit which will see the duties which need to be done and quickly respond to them. Furthermore, in Christian service, page 244.1, we're told that God's servants should be minutemen, ever ready to move as fast as his providence opens the way. Any delay on their part gives time for Satan to work defeat for them. So we've already picked up a wonderful characteristic, which is a responsive heart to the requirements of the service of God. So when we see that there's a gap, there's a lack, there's a need for someone to do something, it should rest upon each and every one of us as our own duty. It shouldn't just be some problem from somewhere, but we should feel it just as intensely as Nehemiah did. He took it upon himself, he prayed and fasted about the issue, and we can be sure he was already laying plans in his heart on how he was going to act to see that the name of the Lord was uplifted and glorified. We'll read on now. We'll go to chapter 2 and hear what happened after that. From verse 2 it says, Wherefore the king said unto me, Why is thy countenance sad, seeing thou art not sick? There is nothing else but sorrow of heart. Then I was very sore afraid, and said unto the king, Let the king live forever. Why should not my countenance be sad, when the city, the place of my fathers, sepulchres, lieth waste, and the gates thereof are consumed with fire? And the king said unto me, For what dost thou make request? So Nehemiah was very sad in those days at work, and even the king noticed it. And when he explained what the problem was, the king offered him an opening and asked, What would you want? And instead of quickly answering like that, what did Nehemiah do? It says, So I prayed to the God of heaven, and I said unto the king, If it please the king, and if thy servant have found favor in thy sight, that thou wouldest send me unto Judah, unto the city of my father's sepulchres, that I might build it. And the king said unto me, For how long shall thy journey be, and when wilt thou return? So it pleased the king to send me, and I set a time. Moreover, I said unto the king, If it please the king, let letters be given me to the governors beyond the river, that they may convey me over till I come into Judah. And if you read on in the chapter, he lays further requests upon the king, letters to allow them to carry the wood and the minerals and all the requirements which they would need to rebuild these walls. So we notice two things there, that he realized that he had a part to play, but he didn't take it up in his own strength, because he even prayed when the king was asking him what he would like to get the favor of God. And thereafter, we come to some other characteristics displayed by this gentleman. One of them is mental culture. And what's meant here by mental culture? When we read about it in Christian service, page 224.5, it says, We must not enter into the Lord's work haphazard and expect success. The Lord needs men of mind and of thought. Jesus calls for co-workers, not blunderers. God wants right thinking and intelligent men to do the great work necessary in the salvation of souls. So when Nehemiah got the news the first time from his brother, he could have haphazardly jumped and went to see the king and made a blunder of all of it. But we see he took his time to fast and to pray about it and to wait for an opening which God provided. He was a man of tact, prudence, and forethought. Those are three important qualities which will enhance our chances of success in the service of the Lord. In fact, they enhance success in almost any other field. And God expects us to employ all these characteristics in His work as well. So we'll read again, still from Christian Service, 231.1, and it says, if a man has tact, industry, and enthusiasm, he will make a success in temporal business, and the same qualities consecrated to the work of God will prove even doubly efficient, for divine power will be combined with human effort. While Nehemiah implored the help of God, he did not fold his own hands, feeling that he had no more care or responsibility in bringing about of his purpose to restore Jerusalem. With admirable prudence and forethought, he proceeded to make all the arrangements necessary to ensure the success of the enterprise. Every movement was marked with great caution. So we see this is from the Southern Watchman, March 15, 1904. And we see that while Nehemiah implored the help of God, he didn't fold his hands and sit back and just pray and say, oh, the walls of Jerusalem have fallen down. Our Father in heaven, may the walls be restored. But he actually set in motion some plans. He began to make a way in which he himself could be a part of this great work of restoration. The example of this holy man Nehemiah should be a lesson to all the people of God that they are not only to pray in faith, but to work in diligence and fidelity. How many difficulties we encounter, how often we hinder the working of providence in our behalf, because prudence, forethought, and painstaking are regarded as having little to do with religion. This is a grave mistake. It is our duty to cultivate and to exercise every power that will render us more efficient workers for God. Careful consideration and well-matured plans are as essential to the success of sacred enterprises today as in the time of Nehemiah. So we shouldn't make that mistake of thinking that in the work of God there's no need of planning, there's no need of consideration. Just as much as they needed that in the time of Nehemiah, so much greater work we have to do now. Let's employ the same methods and pray for God to bless us with success. And in order to pursue all this, there was need of courage, as much as we'll need courage in the work of God today. Reading about courage on Christian Service, page 234.4, we hear that a great work is to be accomplished. Broader plans must be laid. A voice must go forth to arouse the nations. Men whose faith is weak and wavering are not the ones to carry forward the work at this important crisis. We need the courage of heroes and the faith of martyrs. That's why the Bible says all these things were written for us as ensamples, so that when the end of the world has come upon us, we're able to look back and learn from their experiences and employ what we need to employ so that we are able to overcome in our own time. Reading on from the same book, it says, when in faith we take hold of his strength, he will change, wonderfully change the most hopeless, discouraging outlook. He will do this for the glory of his name. God calls upon his faithful ones who believe in him to talk courage to those who are unbelieving and hopeless. May the Lord help us to help one another and to prove him by living faith. It goes on to say, courage, energy, and perseverance they must possess. Though apparent impossibilities obstruct their way, by his grace they are to go forward. Instead of deploring difficulties, they are called upon to surmount them. They are to despair of nothing and to hope for everything. With the golden chain of his matchless love, Christ had bound them to the throne of God. It is his purpose that the highest influence of the universe, emanating from the source of all power, shall be theirs. So we see that God is on hand to give us the courage, the energy, and the perseverance, even in the most impossible of situations. Look at what was happening in the time of Nehemiah, and what a great work they had to do of rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. And without all this courage, the energy, and the perseverance, it looked impossible to the human eye. But even with all these qualities, we are not to think that it was a simple work and that there were no obstacles in the way of Nehemiah and all those who would work with him in the rebuilding. What kind of challenges did Nehemiah face? Let's read from chapter 2, verse 10, and I'll pick some verses up to 20 as well. When Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the servant, the Ammonite, heard of it, it grieved them exceedingly that there was come a man to seek the welfare of the children of Israel. But when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the servant, the Ammonite, and Geshem the Arabian heard it, they laughed us to scorn and despised us and said, "What is this thing that ye do? Will ye rebel against the king?" Then answered I unto them and said, "The God of heaven, he will prosper us. Therefore we his servants will arise and build, but ye have no portion, nor right, nor memorial in Jerusalem." And what happened later in chapter 4, we hear that, "But it came to pass that when Sanballat heard that we builded the wall, he was wroth, and took indignation, and mocked the Jews, and he spake before his brethren and the army of Samaria, and said, What do these feeble Jews? Will they fortify themselves? Will they sacrifice? Will they make an end in a day? Will they revive the stones out of the heaps of the rubbish which are burned?" Now Tobiah the Ammonite was by him, and he said, "Even that which they build, if a fox go up, he shall even break down their stone wall." So we can see some of the challenges were not really physical ones, but they came in the form of opposition from those who didn't want to see the work of the Lord going forward. And more so in these days when it's the restoration of all things, will we meet the very same things. We'll meet people who are not happy to see the restoration of all things. Did we hear even the words when they were asking, "What is these things that you will do?" And they laughed them to scorn. Similar in our days, we know from Revelation chapter 13 that there are people who say, "Who can make war with the beast?" And in other words, they're saying, "Who can restore the times of God?" So we now understand from the experience of Nehemiah that we're likely to meet such things as we engage in the work of restoration. But God has not left us without some counsel and advice on how to counteract discouragement when we meet it in the work of God. So we're going to read here from Christian Service, page 239.3. "The servants of the Lord must expect every kind of discouragement." So we already warned, they were forewarned. Every kind of discouragement is to be expected. They will be tried not only by anger, contempt, and cruelty of enemies, but by the indolence, inconsistency, lukewarmness, and treachery of friends and helpers. Even some who seem to desire the work of God to prosper will yet weaken the hands of his servants by hearing, reporting, and half believing the slanders, boasts, and menaces of their adversaries. Amid great discouragements, Nehemiah made God his trust, and here is our defense. So we see there's opposition from outside, there's opposition from inside as well. These are the things which we are supposed to expect. So God is already helping us to count the cost when we set ourselves to engage in the work so that we know exactly what to expect. But as we're told here, just as Nehemiah made God his trust, here also is our defense. A remembrance of what the Lord has done for us will prove a support in every danger. He that spared not his own son, but delivered him up for us, shall he not now with him also freely give us all things? And if God be for us, who can be against us? However craftily the plots of Satan and his agents may be laid, God can detect them and bring to naught all their counsels. So our defense is in believing that God can bring all the counsels of the enemies to naught, and ours is just to go forward and continue to serve, continue to lay plans, continue to carry out plans in the work of rebuilding. From the Review and Herald, July 17, 1894, we're told that the Lord calls for soldiers who will not fail nor be discouraged, but who will accept the work with all its disagreeable features. He would have us all take Christ for our pattern. So just as Christ said to the disciples, are you able to drink of the cup that I drink of? We're told as well, let's be ready to accept the work with its disagreeable features as well, so that God will help us to go through them. Furthermore, an extract from Acts of the Apostles, page 230 says, those who today teach unpopular truths need not be discouraged if at times they meet with no more favorable reception, even from those who claim to be Christians, than did Paul and his fellow workers. The messengers of the cross must arm themselves with watchfulness and prayers and move forward with faith and courage, working always in the name of you. So it means no matter what we meet, no matter what discouragements come our way, no matter what arises in our path which seems to prevent us from accomplishing God's purpose, watchfulness and prayers, moving forward with faith will keep us going. But the challenges to Nehemiah and the brethren who had joined in to build on the wall didn't end with just the words of Sanballat and Tobiah laughing. They actually set plans to attack the workers on the wall. And what did Nehemiah and the workers do? Were they afraid? Did they throw down the work? We'll read from Nehemiah chapter 4, from verse 15 up to 18, and we're told that, and it came to pass when our enemies heard that it was known unto us, and God had brought their counsel to naught, that we returned all of us to the wall, everyone to his work. And it came to pass from that time forth that the half of my servants wrought in the work, and the other half of them held both the spears and the shields and the bows and the habergeons, and the rulers were behind all the house of Judah. And they which builded on the wall are they that bear the burdens with those that laid it. Everyone with one of his hands wrought in the work, and the other hand held a weapon. For the builders, everyone had a sword girded by his side, and so built it. And he that sounded the trumpet was by me. So it's interesting what they did. They continued with the work, but when they realized that there was a threat, they had to change their strategy. But instead of only building and carrying the tools for building, everyone was carrying a sword, bows and arrows, shields, spears. They were ready for war at the same time as they were building. So they were building, but they were on the lookout for the approach of the enemy. And that's the kind of watchfulness and prayer which we need to have even in this work at the current time. We may not be holding actual spears and actual bows and arrows and shields, but our shields are the prayers and the watchfulness and the well-laid plans which will see us going forward with the work, even amidst all the obstacles, amidst all the evil speaking from those who would be enemies of the work. So this shows us a number of things from Nehemiah and the team who worked with him. That is aggressiveness, determination, zeal, and dexterity. We're going to read a little bit about those. And as we're reading, let not just be words which pass by, but may we arm ourselves with these. And if we don't have these qualities, it's time to be praying for them, to say, God, help us to accomplish these qualities in our own lives and to apply them as we also do the work of restoring, which is upon us at this time. So we're told here from the Southern Watchman, December 1, 1903, that God does not generally work miracles to advance his truth. If the husbandman neglects to cultivate the soil, God works no miracle to counteract the sure results. He works according to great principles. And it is our part to mature wise plans and set in operation the means whereby God shall bring about certain results. Those who make no decided effort but simply wait for the Holy Spirit to compel them to action will perish in darkness. You are not to sit still and do nothing in the work of God. So it doesn't work if we just sit down and pray and say, God, may your work be done, and we don't actually do the work, but we're supposed to lay mature, wise plans, set in operation. Actually, God regards us as an arm to carry out his work here. So if we just pray and are not ready to actually do anything, then we defeat the purposes of God. Unfortunately, some who engage in missionary service are weak, nerveless, spiritless, easily discouraged. They lack push, they have not those positive traits of character that give power to do something, the spirit and energy that kindle enthusiasm. Those who would win success must be courageous and hopeful. They should not cultivate only the passive, but also the active virtues. Can you imagine if we were those people in the days of Nehemiah, and we had threats on our lives and laughter and derision from our enemies? And if we're amongst these who are easily discouraged and weak and nerveless, we would have thrown the tools down and just left the work. But we can see that these men were determined, at the cost of their lives, even to defend the work and to complete it. And they knew that God would stand for them as long as they would also provide themselves or be there as the arm of the Lord to accomplish God's work. I'm still reading one from Christian Service. I'm on page 229.5 and going onwards. We're told that he has given us a great work to do. Let's do it with accuracy and determination. Let us show in our lives what the truth has done for us. Right. So this is what Nehemiah and the gentleman went on to do. I'm reading from Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 21 and 22. So we labored in the work, and half of them held the spears from the rising of the morning till the stars appeared. Likewise, at the same time, said I unto the people, let everyone with his servant lodge in Jerusalem, that in the night they may be a guard to us and labor on the day. So neither I nor my brethren nor my servants nor the men of God which followed me, none of us put off our clothes, saving that everyone put them off for washing. So they were armed and ready at any hour of the day with their clothes on and only taken off to wash and back on and back at the work, lodging in Jerusalem to guard during the night and to labor during the day. We can see the amount of zeal, the constancy, the sacrifice. They really took the work as their own. They felt it was their burden. So while they were praying to God for all the help, they knew they had to put their utmost and their 100% effort. I can even almost feel the zeal that they had, and I pray for a similar zeal for us also when we do the work of God. So reading about this constancy and sacrifice, we hear that even the Savior was an untiring worker. He did not measure his work by hours. His time, his heart, his strength were given to labor for the benefit of humanity. Entire days were devoted to labor. Entire nights were spent in prayer, that he might be braced to meet the wily foe in all his deceptive working, and fortified to do his work of uplifting and restoring humanity. The man who loves God does not measure his work by the 8-hour system. He works at all hours, is never off duty, and as he has opportunity, he does good. Everywhere, at all times, in all places, he finds opportunity to work for God. He carries fragrance wherever he goes. If only we could have such a mindset and such a love for God and for his work, that we know that we're ever on duty and we never lay down our tools. From Symbolic Code, Volume 3, number 4, we also read that spiritual prosperity is closely bound up with Christian liberality, and that therefore God's cause today in the closing work of the church will advance only as we make a covenant by sacrifice. Indeed, if sacrifice was required in Moses' day, in Nehemiah's day, and in Paul's, when the demands of the work were comparatively small, how could he possibly require any less today when all things are to be restored, when the gospel must go to every nation, kindred, tongue, and people in just a short time? So we see that it requires a sacrifice of our time, of labor, input, even of means as well, to see that the work will go forward. as it is, we have a work to carry forward in announcing to the world the message of Elijah, the restoration of the statutes and the judgments, and the worship in Jerusalem. Have we put any cent towards that work? The more we put, the little we have, the more God will bless it and enable us to accomplish the work. Something else happened in the days of Nehemiah, and I'm reading from chapter 10 of the book, verse 28 to 32. We're told that, and the rest of the people, the priests, the Levites, the porters, the singers, the Nethinims, and all they that had separated themselves from the people of the lands unto the law of God, their wives, their sons, their daughters, everyone having knowledge and having understanding, they clave to their brethren, their nobles, and entered into a curse and into an oath to walk in God's law, which was given by Moses, the servant of God, and to observe and do all the commandments of the Lord our God, and his judgments and his statutes, and that we would not give our daughters unto the people of the land, nor take their daughters for our sons. And if the people of the land bring any ware or victuals on the Sabbath to sell, that we would not buy it of them on the Sabbath or on the holy day, and that we would leave the 7th year and the exaction of every debt. Also, we made ordinances for us to charge ourselves yearly with the third part of a shekel for the service of the house of our God. I'm reading from Timely Greetings, 10, 22.1 and 2. And the comment on these verses is that here you see a record of complete revival and reformation such as never has been. The things that were revived are these: the house of God was rebuilt and the sacred services re-established. The old wastes were rebuilt and the city re-inhabited. The reforms which took place where the priests and the Levites were purified. All the children of the captivity separated themselves from the filthiness of the heathen. All entered into a curse and an oath to walk in God's law, to observe his judgments, his statutes, not to give their daughters to the people of the land, or to take their daughters as wives for their sons, strict observance of the Sabbath, and liberally pledged to support the work of God with their means. And we're told that such genuine and complete revival reformation had never been launched since men fell in sin. The revival and reformation of that day is typical of the one to take place even in our day, as we have mentioned this before. So we see that Nehemiah also realized that it wasn't all about working physically, but it was making a covenant with God to go back to all the laws to make sure they're keeping the commandments, the statutes, and the judgments, to separate from the filth of the land and to maintain themselves as a pure people so that God could continue to prosper them. Because if they'd done all the work of building and still hadn't obeyed God, still weren't willing to sacrifice for the cause, were still not keeping the Sabbath and all the holy days, then they would have lost God's favor and everything would have just fallen again. But to maintain that favor and God's continued protection, there was such a revival and a reformation at that time. So we see that for sure the work which went on in that day is a parallel to the work which is going on in our day, and the same reforms are to be expected to us. So in conclusion, God does have some words of encouragement for us in these final days. What is God's encouragement to us? Testimonies, Volume 9, page 141. It is not for you to be intimidated by outward appearances, however forbidding they may be. It is for you to carry forward the work of the Lord as he has said it should be carried. To present truth believers, one of the surest evidences that the Lord is leading in the work is that regardless of ceaseless opposition, paucity of laborers, many other handicaps, the work is steadily moving onward with an irresistible power. It is indeed like a mustard seed. And we see that. It's an encouragement that even though there's opposition, even though there are a number of challenges, there are few workers, but the work is still moving on. The message is still spreading. It will reach to all the world for a witness with an irresistible power. It is indeed like the mustard seed. And we're also told in Answer Book number 4, page 26.3, that despite its humble and insignificant beginning, the criticism and the opposition against it, and the multiform obstacles, and impediments which it has had to surmount, it is awakening multitudes throughout Laodicea. It has launched the ship of reformation. While many have already boarded, others are rapidly approaching the decision to seek the safety it affords. No doubt, as the work goes forward on the camp, some of the experiences of Nehemiah will come to the builders, but the Lord will give wisdom now as he did then. So we're thankful that we have this history chronicled of the challenges which they faced when they were rebuilding the temple, rebuilding the wall back in the day. And those are the same challenges which we basically face today if we employ all the qualifications which God has laid down as for our success in praying, in faith, go forward against all the obstacles. God will see us having the same and even greater success than they did in that day. Let's continue to pray where we don't have these qualifications, that God might fit us for the work, and that after it all, we might also rejoice in the establishment of the kingdom. May God bless them.